कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुः मा ते सङ्गोत्स्वकर्मणि।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
I have some questions for each panelist. Just 2 minutes they have to answer, and then we'll have a few minutes to take your question. Because we just completed with Krishna ji, so maybe I'll go back to Bhai Sahib Satpal Sankal sir. Sir, you talked about being a perfect student of Sikh to absorb the teachings of your Guru and uplift yourself from sorrows. What role did Gita play compared to what role Guru Granth Sahib or your own teachings play? Is there any significant difference, or did you find any way in which you can use Gita to guide yourself to be a better Sikh?
It's a good question. Gita basically, as we learnt this morning, talks about the 5 vices: Kam, Krodh, Moh, Lobh, Ankar, anger, greed, attachment, ego. Now, Sikhism also talks about these 5 vices. And to overcome these 5 vices, ego is one of the biggest vices that Sikhism talks about, to let go of your ego. And I think it's a similar message in Gita also. When Lord Krishna went to Duryodhana and to plead with him that not to fight and to give them the Pandavas, the 5, at first he said give them the 5 lords, then he said if you cannot give them the land that belongs to them, give them at least 1 each for all the 5 brothers. And Duryodhana refused. What is that? Ego. He said, I will not even give them the tip of a needle, and you talking about 5 parcels of land. Now, ego is how I feel the Mahabharata started. Draupadi was a very accomplished artist, Chitrkar, poetess, and there was a big function in the new Raj Mahal. Duryodhana was invited. Now, Draupadi, as you might have heard this story, decorated the swimming pool and it looked like a garden. Duryodhana was invited and was late, and instead of going through the main hall, he went through the pool thinking that it is a garden, but he didn't realize it was pool. When he jumped into it, the whole arrangement of Draupadi got spoiled. So Draupadi said, "Aakhir mein ande ka aulad andhi hai." That one word, I think, started Mahabharata. So I learned a lot from Bhagavad Gita to give up your ego, to give up your anger, to give up your greediness. So it's a similar message. And also one last thing I have to say, that similar messages in Guru Granth Sahib also. Gita is telling us to look inward and learn from the sublime message of Gita. Ustad Job, he said, ilm ke jahul se behtar hai jahul ka ilm. Gyan ki murkhta se behtar hai murkhta ka gyan. Instead of knowing the knowledge, is better to know what foolishness is. So I find a lot of similarities between the two.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. So let me come back to Mr. Goldberg. Your article in Huffington Post, the Gita and Me, has been very well received, and it's a very insightful article. And you also talked about yogastha kuru karmani, the whole idea of being able to do things from a yoga state of mind, whatever you do. Can you tell us, how can we apply it in daily life? How do you apply it in your daily life, that particular principle you elaborated?
Well, as I suggested before, it was verses like that that convinced me of the importance of sadhana, of regular practice. That's how one cultivates the state of being that yoga is. These days, people talk about yoga as something you do. They're going to do yoga today, meaning they do some asanas. But the definition of yoga in the Gita and in the Yoga Sutras is first and foremost a state of consciousness. Its very definition is unity of consciousness. And how does one achieve that? You can't fake that, but you can cultivate it. And the way I understand to cultivate it is through regular sadhana. So I've been meditating, supplemented by some asanas and pranayama and some devotional practices as suits me and my time, but every day for the 47 years now. And there's other verses in the Gita that sort of serve as touchstones for me that are both instructive and descriptive. So when it talks about the yogi having a mind that is like a lamp in a windless place, or when it talks about having equanimity in loss and gain, in victory and defeat, in pain and pleasure, to the extent I don't have those, I realize there's something off in my sadhana, there's something off in the way I'm eating or behaving in the world. So that calls for adjustments in those things.
Thank you very much. Dr. Meghani, you talked about how even though you are born here, you have been very influenced by Bhagavad Gita, and as an emergency physician and as one of the founders of the Hindu American Foundation, you talk about how this has been guiding, and you even brought in the whole idea of in the Sita Prajna and the second chapter, you talk about Sangas Teju Pajayate, Kama, Krodha Vijayate, of the whole idea of that, how Kama, Krodha, and all of them decay. How do you apply it? When you are being an emergency physician, when patients come to you, how does this guide you when you are in conflict, when you are struggling? How does this actually affect you?
Yeah, unfortunately, in the emergency room, we don't have a lot of time to think about things, to make really quick decisions. So, some people who may not have this sort of teaching in their mind get very, very troubled because they're trying to make the perfect decision and are looking to see what outcome there is. And I think many people here, you may have dealt with this in terms of your own relatives or parents. What do you do? And I'm actually a very hyper person in life, but as a physician, I'm actually quite calm. Because I have a few seconds to make a decision that's going to affect the person and many hundreds of people around them. And people have asked me this, nurses have said, Dr. Meghani, you're always very hyper, but whenever someone is really sick, you're very calm. And I say, well, I have to be, have to have a balanced mind in thinking about something, and I have to do what's best, and I don't have time to try to do two things within 5 seconds. And whatever outcome happens is what we have to live with. And almost always, I think we do the right thing when we have that kind of balance or peace of mind. And I'm able to get through the day knowing that I'm prepared for whatever result might happen, knowing that whatever I've done has been in the best interest of the person or the patient in front of me. And I think if we all apply that for everything we do in our life, whether it's our relationships, our spouse, our family, our work, not only do I think we're living out the Gita, but I think that we reduce our own stress and we become a happier person.
Professor Goldman, you have been teaching Sanskritam and you have been, talking about Mahabharata, you have been specifically talking about Bhagavad Gita, and you impacted hundreds and thousands of students in the University of California, Berkeley, and beyond. When you teach Bhagavad Gita to people who come from different religions, how do you take the essence of the spirit of Gita? How do you make it secular but still retain the magical essence, the spirituality in Gita in such a way that people can actually apply it? What do you do and what do you tell them?
Well, it's a very interesting task that is set before one, because as Dr. Kaipa says, you're coming with students coming from all kinds of backgrounds. Most of my students come from the Indo-American community, but have often very little understanding or background in the Gita. Some come from Pakistani families, from Chinese families, from all over. So we try to put before them, what is the essential issue in the Gita? What is it doing? And we also look at the work in a historical perspective. One of the things, that Ananda Kumar Swami said, he said the Gita is a compendium of the whole Vedic doctrine to be found in the earlier Vedas, Brahmanas, and Upanishads, and being therefore the basis of all later developments, it can be regarded as the focus of all Indian religion. And that's one of the brilliant things about the Gita, is that it brings in, through these different yogas, a kind of a stepped path. He starts, after scolding Arjuna, he starts with this Jnana Yoga. What is the Jnana Yoga? Is the teaching of the Upanishads. But then, how many people can have the intellectual capacity and the sheer leisure time to sit somewhere and ponder on the nature of the Atman? We can't do it in this modern world. Well, there's another way to do it. Then he talks about Karma Yoga, how you can act in the world without being tainted by the world. And then comes the culmination, which is Bhakti Yoga, which is devotion to Lord Krishna, or to God, whichever God you want to choose. If you want to talk about the God in any religion, we talked earlier about how all scriptures finally teach much the same thing. So you try to bring the Gita in as something, as a work of world religious literature, and also as the culmination of Indian religious literature, which is one of the reasons, I think, for its great success, where even an Advaita, a great like Adi Shankaracharya, would write a commentary on it. The Vishishtadvaita, great scholar, Ramanujan, writes a commentary on the Gita. The dualist, Madhva, writes a commentary on the Gita. And almost every important Indian spiritual teacher from that time onward has at least one commentary on the Gita. From Adi Shankaracharya to Gandhi, Aurobindo, you name it. Goldberg, whatever.
Thank you very much. Dr. Krishna Kalra, when you are an entrepreneur and when you are practicing Gita, does it mean when you go into competitive world with your biotechnology, you just say, let it happen. I'm just going to let somebody win because the fruits of action is not in my hands and I don't really care. Is that how you lead your entrepreneurial company? How do you really balance between the spiritual and material elements while practicing Bhagavad Gita?
Well, I have focused on the patient, the ultimate beneficiary of my work. So one of the projects we did in 1988 is called antigen retrieval. It is practiced in almost every lab in the world where the cancer tissue is diagnosed. We were the first one to publish. Most people did not try because it was contrary to the going opinion, or it was counterintuitive against the wisdom. But if we did not solve the problem, the cancer survival rate most likely still will be in the 20 or 30%, as opposed to in some cases 90% now, 5-year survival. So focus is always the patient. And as a result, and I admit that I have at times lost the big picture of monetizing the research. So that's how now as I just said a little earlier, 30% of the cancers today are not diagnosed correctly. As a result, patient has a chance, a luck, of doctor prescribing him the right drug or not. I don't have a lot of money, I have not raised a lot of money, but I'm creative, and I surround myself with few very creative people. And I believe that in the last 4 or 5 years of work, hard work, we are on a way to improve that significantly. Whether we will monetize this research in a big way or not, only time will tell.
One great Ahalya boy had gone to a teacher to learn about Bhagavad Gita, and the teacher started, Dharma Kshetre Kuru Kshetre. She said, stop. I got it. She said, what nonsense are you saying? This is the first line of the first verse of the first chapter, which has got 18 chapters and 700 slokas. Is this your level of interest? She said, no, you just said, Dharma Kshetre Kuru Kshetre. What does it mean? Kshetre Dharmam Kuru. Whichever field of endeavor you are in, wherever, whatever you are doing, find out what is the right dharma and do it. That is the message of Bhagavad Gita. The Kuru is the action part of it. So that is one thing. So that is one thing that reminded me as I listened to 5 of the wonderful panelists. Second thing, it is important because we are now moving into how do we apply it, and I'm going to, once I take a couple of questions, everybody will have like a couple of minutes to just say what are some recommendations they have for you to do it. As they do it, one story that comes to my mind is on the 18th day after the war is won, Arjuna goes home. There are very few people left on both sides, and when Arjuna goes to the home and all these people are waiting to give him arti and invite him home, he is the prima donna who has won, the great commander. Lord Krishna, till then, because as the Sarathi, he was getting down and opening the door for Arjuna, but on this day, he just says, get down by yourself. Arjuna feels upset. Wait a minute. I mean, all these times he has treated me so respectfully. Today, instead of when I come in as the victorious commander, he says, just get down and go. So then, of course, Arjuna doesn't say anything. He gets down and goes far enough from the chariot. And Arjuna looks around, makes sure there is nobody nearby, and he jumps out of the chariot. And the Hanuman, who was on the flag, he just takes off like a lightning. That instant, the entire chariot bursts into flames. Arjuna and everybody else is surprised. What happened there? Krishna says, because you are under my protection, all the great astras, the weapons by Bhishma and Drona and all the Brahmastra, none of them could act on you. And now that my role as the chariot driver is over, if I get down before you get down, you will be gone. That is his final message. And still, because of that, I had to let you go before I go. So the idea is, you do what you do under the protection of the divine consciousness, the Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, whatever you want to call. But if you do your actions with that kind of an awareness that I am the nimitta matram bhavasavya sachi, I have to do what I need to do, but something else is happening, then any action you take, there can be a protection. So just keep that in mind. And we had, I think there were a couple of hands up. We had one hand up. So can you speak loud and say what your question is?
Without mic, I can speak very loud.
Yeah, I have a feeling. Please.
My question is, Swami Gyananandji Maharaj.
No. panelists. To the question to the panelists right now.
Okay, whoever.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So my question is this. Everybody says from my childhood, I had Bhagwan andar hai. Bhagwan andar hai. Everybody knows. अब तो हम old भी हो गए. अभी तक भगवान को खोज रहे हैं. My question is there any way in Gita that we can reach to God who is very close to us? Is it through sadhana or name chanting or Gita Adhyay or Mahatma, whatever it is? That is the answer I want.
So the question, for in case you didn't understand the Hindi or other part, what is the one way? What is one approach to reach God? How do I practice sadhana? Anybody? You want to speak?
This is a very universal question. How to attain, reach God, how to remember God. There are two things. One is dhyan and one is gyan. जब आपका ध्यान किसी ज्ञान की प्राप्ति के लिए चलता है, जब वो ज्ञान प्राप्त हो जाए, ध्यान खत्म हो जाता है. In other words, when you are looking for some knowledge, you want to learn a bike, you want to learn how to drive a car, you have full concentration. You want to learn how to fly a plane, you have full concentration. But once you achieve that knowledge, once you learn how to ride a bike, once you learn how to drive a car, your dhyan is gone. There's no concentration. If you meditate on that God, on that one God, whichever God you want to have faith in and remember, you have to have constant dhyan. You have to have constant remembrance. You cannot just say, okay, I have attained God and that's it. I've read Bhagavad Gita, I've read Bible, I've read this stuff. You have to keep your dhyan going. That's one way of making sure that you are in tune with the divine.
I just want to know that what is the difference between rigidity and sthita pragnasthiti?
Rigidity and sthita pragnasthiti. Anybody wants to take? And sthita pragna, the balanced state.
If you are a sthita pragna, people call you that you are a rigid person.
I can take that. And you want to take that? No, please take it.
No, because rigidity is, of course, a negative, a pejorative thing. Someone who is unbending, who doesn't acknowledge the arguments of others, and so on and so forth. This is not the teaching of the Gita. The Gita is, Sthita Prajna is someone who has calmed and focused his or her own intellect. That is, makes it stable, so it's not blown by the winds, it's not driven by desires, and so on and so forth. So you're able to detach from all the pressures of the world and still get on with whether it's your business or your medical practice or so on. This is why Arjuna asks him so pointedly, Sthita pragnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadihi kim prabhasheta kimasya vrajeta kim. What is that person like? What is the person whose mind is centered? So it's more like center, not a rigidity.
I'll add a little bit and saying anything you take it as the truth and the only truth and everything else is a lie, that is the state of rigidity. There is nothing like only one truth. There are many truths. So even in Rigveda we talk about it like there are many different ways. Ekam sat vipraha baudha vadanti, we say. So the moment you make other people wrong because you got the truth, because you got the path, because you have the right path, then you are rigid no matter how much of a bhakta you are, no matter how much of a practitioner you are. The ability to have that balance in perspective, that ability to have the seeing that the God as well as the demon are part of the same consciousness. The Rakshasas as well as the Devas and the Manushyas are all the three states of the consciousness. When I am unwilling to listen to that, then I become the Saddam Hussein, or I become the enemy, or I become the divine. When I have that consciousness of openness and fluidity and flexibility of recognizing you as much as I have got the same consciousness, and that if I can have that balanced perspective, then I'm practicing Gita without getting rigid. Thank you.
Thank you for a nice presentation. Maybe this is my stupid question, but I want to ask, I'm trying to work on a hypothesis to correlate Gita and modern molecular biology. Is there any school of thought in dharma or religion that what modern science proved, DNA study indicated in mice and genes hypothesis was when introduced, they killed mice, introduced bacteria, E. coli or something else, and they found that DNA was still transformed into other form while mice body was killed. So this is what I think exactly what Gita says.
And the question is?
Nainam na chinnanti.
And the question is?
Question is, Atma and DNA are behaving same. Is there any school of thought, any correlation between what scientists saw in the form of DNA, what Krishna already said to Surya Deva that what Atma is nothing, Atma is already what people later saw as DNA, they said Atma.
Thank you.
So what I'm saying, Gita is...
Let me repeat the question. Thank you. I got the question. Thank you. Let's see what they will say. All right? Very nice of you. Thank you. I think we need to call her onto panel next time, but for the time being, we'll take the question. So, she is saying that is there a correlation between what the biology and technology is discovering regarding the genes and some of those, and what Bhagavad Gita says in terms of the soul and some of those. Are there any kind of correlation between science and spirituality? Are there some things you are familiar with? And would you like anybody wants to take that question?
Actually, everything that happens in our body, it starts with DNA. There's a sequence, and there are 4 bases. And those bases, when they are in a particular order, we have blue eyes or brown eyes or what. Now, whenever there is a mutation is a change in the sequence of DNA, then something haywire goes in, whether it's cancer or heart disease or gray hair or blindness. Now, meditation, a calm, composed persona or state of mind, and regular meditation allows repair enzymes. These are in our body and they function better, these enzymes, when we are in a meditative state or we are in a calm stage. And they do their work and they repair those DNA back to their original sequence. And as a result, there is instant cure of cancer, or there's no cancer, or there's no heart disease, or there's less prevalent of disease in a person like that. So if I understand the question, this is...
My question is addressed to Goldberg. And the question is, straight away I come to that. Recently I've been reviewing the history books on yoga. There is history of yoga. And interestingly what I found that nobody has written a history book about yoga, how yoga came, whatever, on India. And there are something like 8 or 9 books of history of yoga in America. You are one of them. Now your book is a great book because you start with Emerson and come down to write Dr. Ornish. Now my question is, I come to a specific book which was published in 12 if you have read it. If you haven't, you may not answer it. The question is, the title of the book is The Subtle Body. And I'm sure you have read it, okay? Now in that, the last sentence of that book...
Question, please.
This is what I'm saying, this is a question.
Yeah.
The last sentence of the book raises a very important question. And what it says is that the concept of subtle body is a challenge, if I mistake not, to the American in general. How do you accommodate that metaphysical, ontological status of the consciousness of subtle body when you are practicing yoga the way you are practicing in America.
Thank you.
So would you please answer it?
There seem to be several questions in there, but let me just make a general statement. I hope it answers the question. There have been histories of yoga written that focus really on the recent history of Hatha Yoga and do not do justice to the fullness of what yoga really is and what the impact of the transmission of yogic teachings have been in America over the course of at least 200 years. So, because the term yoga has become so physicalized and sort of co-opted by asana practice. That's one thing. The good news in that world is that there's much more awareness of the depth of yoga, the profundity of yoga, the spirituality of yoga than most people realize if they just look at the images in magazines or popular books that are written. I know a lot of yoga teachers, and I go to those conferences sometimes. There's a deep concern that the yoga that is taught has been trivialized and the focus on physicality has gone too far. And I feel very hopeful that the depth of the teaching and the true meaning of yoga and the true impact it can have on people's lives is alive and well in America, and it's not being corrupted as much as what is seen to be on the surface.
So, by the way, because of the paucity of time, we will just take these 3 questions and end it instead of a final word. So that makes it a little bit adjustment, please.
Yeah, my question is actually, before asking the question, I just want to request you people not to mistake me as an atheist. This is not my question. As I promote Gita a lot of people ask me this question. As I'm not well versed with Gita, I couldn't explain them, I couldn't answer them. So I'm asking you people. If you look at Gita, in the first couple of chapters, Lord Krishna explains Arjuna. He actually urges him to follow Dharma, uphold Dharma, and practice Dharma. And almost everything is revolves around Dharma. And at the end, he says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. So if you look at it, it looks like he asks him to leave everything, leave Dharma. If for a neutral observer, it looks like a conflict. First he says, practice Dharma, uphold Dharma. And at the end, he says, leave Dharma. So it's not I think it's not a conflict, not for me, but a lot of people do feel that way. So how do you explain that?
Anybody wants to take that? Want to try?
This gets into a common issue in Indian philosophy about levels of truth. I mean, Dharma is the way you act in the world. You know, this is, as I said before, you know, as Adi Shankaracharya teaches, you know, the Dharma was made in a twofold way, Nivritti Dharma, Paritti Dharma. This is how you act in the world. But God is above the world, is beyond the world. The world is contained in God. So what he's saying is, you know, in order to attain divinity, in order to attain God, you have to practice. You have to do your sadhana. You have to follow your class duty. This is what Dharma is very much tied to these traditional notions of Varnashrama Dharma. Because this is, you are a Kshatriya, that's why you have to fight. That's what he means. If someone else fights, no good. Kshatriya must fight. So this is the thing. So the highest position, the Paramarthika truth, you know, as they say, is, you know, Dharman Tyaja, Adharman Tyaja. Give up Dharma, give up non-Dharma. Dharma, Dharma, Parityaja. When you give up both of them, right? Tyagamapi, Parityaja. Give up abandonment itself. Because you enter that world of complete non-duality. Complete non-duality. Where Dharma doesn't have a meaning because there's no adharma. Once you have the world of dualities, right? You want to become nirdvandva, without duality. But in this world you can't avoid it, because for every deva there's an asura, for every dharma there's an adharma. How do you get beyond it? That's, I think, what the Lord is saying.
One is, in the beginning, as a discipline, do your dharma. Because you have to start with certain set of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama they talk about. You have to have yama, niyamas, certain self-control and self-discipline and sadhana practices. For that, you need to know what is samuhika dharma, samajika dharma, swadharma. There are different ways of defining what role you are in, what is the appropriate dharma. At that time, that is what in the beginning part of it, Krishna says about what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. But when you are in confusion, when you are unable to make a decision about what is my dharma, what is my role, who am I, and I am struggling with the existential crisis of either I need to do this war as a kshatriya or as a rightful, as a king who is preserving dharma, when I am confused, at that time, look for something that goes beyond your ego, because at some level your ego has to embrace the dharma. Let go of the ego. That also means let go of the dharma which you are looking at. At that time, sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. At that time you get into a mode of surrender. When you are asking for Sharanagati, the teacher, the guru will tell you what is the dharma. At that time there is no dharma for you, because you are surrendering yourself, and at that stage that is appropriate. But if you are not in that surrender stage, then you are using your buddhi, identify what is most appropriate and do that. That's why he didn't say in the beginning, he said it in the end. So it is important to recognize there is a certain context in which each of the teachings have been said. If it is misappropriated or if it is interpreted without proper knowledge, you can take anything and then make a mincemeat out of it and then say that this is what Gita said. That is the major damage that happens most of the time. Thank you very much.
In the Gita, Lord Krishna tells us in so many shlokas what right action looks like, what right living looks like. Here in this panel, we've been shown, not just in the terms of the Gita, but in actual actions, in actual lives, in actual careers, in actual roles, what living the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita look like. Whether in the role of a doctor, a professor, an author, a consultant, a scientist, we've been able to witness in all of their roles how the teachings of the Gita not only are applicable, but actually drive all of our actions. A thread that I saw that ran through what everyone spoke was a thread of truth. Understanding the truth of who we are. I'm not this material body. I'm not my anger. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my ego. Then understanding the truth of my role, my dharma. Not just universal dharma of being a good person, but the truth of my individual dharma. So first, the truth of the nature of who we are, then the truth of the role that we play, and then of course the truth of how to act, based on who we are and based on what our dharma is, based on our role. And lastly, understanding that even taking all of those truths into consideration, none of it is in our hands. And to surrender not just the fruits of the actions, but the actions themselves, the knowledge itself, unto God. It's been such a wonderful, wonderful honor to have you all with us. We have a very special speaker up next, and before I introduce him, I wanted to just take 30 seconds and quickly comment on a point raised by our sister about the connection between molecular biology and the Bhagavad Gita. Because there's one very crucial point that I wanted to quickly point out, which is that regardless of what genes we have, regardless of what DNA we have, that gene will only express itself based on something in the environment interacting with the cell and causing a reaction. You can have a gene for cancer, but you're not going to develop that cancer until and unless something from the environment, from the medium of the cell, causes a reaction in the cell and causes that gene to become turned on. And I mentioned that because in the Bhagavad Gita and in our Indian spirituality, the concept of Satya, of the association of the saints, is so crucial. Why? Because we all have the DNA of enlightenment. We all have the DNA, the gene of being divine. But what we need is something in our environment, in that medium, to interact with this membrane of the self and to cause a reaction with us that turns on that awareness, that enlightenment, that truth. And that's the role that our revered gurus and saints play in our lives.
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुः मा ते सङ्गोत्स्वकर्मणि।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,